stupid questions.
The Photoshop team has done an amazing job in terms of 3D controls in Photoshop CS6. That being said, if you worked really hard to understand the 3D controls in CS5, you might be confused as to where those old controls went. And the Photoshop team had to really juggle two things. They had to make sure it was really easy for new users to start a 3D object, automatically get a ground plane, and move things around, but they also wanted to make sure that the same kinds of high-end controls for specific coordinates were still in there for folks like me. And at first glance, I had trouble finding them. So this demonstration is meant for all the folks out there that are using 3D before and you're wondering where those controls went. Okay, let's jump in. I've created a simple text extrusion which is now live, so this text can be changed at any time. Over on the right-hand side, you can see we've got our layers panel and we've got our 3D object inside here. Now, as soon as I click on that 3D object and make it active, when I have the move tool, you see that it launches me into my 3D environment. And what I found to be a real changer in how to work with this is to take the 3D panel that I have here and drag it out and lock it over to there. I found that I was getting confused in selecting the 3D layers in the layers panel and the 3D layers in the 3D panel. So I decided to just leave the layers panel alone and jump over to this layers panel in 3D. It cleared a lot of confusion up for me. So you can see in our 3D panel, we've got our overall environment, we have the scene, we have the current view that we're looking at, and then we have our object. And if you have more than one object, then they will show up there if you've got them merged into one 3D scene. We've got a spotlight, default camera, and we're set ready to go. At the top, you can see each one of these settings for all of the scene elements, or just the 3D mesh, or just the materials, or just the lights. What I tend to find is that I like to click down inside here and then look over at my new properties panel. The two of these are working hand in hand, and we can scale our layers down if we want, just to have more of a view. So you can see with this selected, which is the text layer, I have the text color, which I can change very quickly. I even have the characters panel. When I click on that, I can change the character of this type very quickly. Edit source is going to open up a second document where we can change the actual typing of the characters that we've had. So very easy to understand how to get to those parts. Also on the top portion, you can see instead of having the repose interface, remember when you click to make something 3D, it would open up that separate interface and it would take you from your canvas. Again, this is another one of the really smart things the Photoshop team did. They said, we like to work in the canvas, not in separate weird windows somewhere else. So repose controls are now directly inside here. There's our deform controls. You can either use the controls in the properties panel or use them directly on the interface over here. The same thing goes with the cap, and you can see that I've inflated this a little bit and given this the open face of the T a little bit of a bump on there. And look what we have here. That's where our coordinates are sitting. So those are the things that I was looking for before that were hidden up in the top of the options menu. That's where you look. Every single one of these has a coordinates setting directly over here. So if we go to the current view, look, we have coordinates. We have our 3D camera setting, and we have the coordinates. The scene, we have coordinates, and we have our overall scene. The environment, same thing. There's our environment, and there's our coordinates. Sometimes I get things twisted around, and maybe I just want to reset everything back to 0, so it's really easy to do that now. So here is my character that I've got as 3D, and if I wanted to, I could go in and type 90 degrees, and you can see it changes 90 degrees. I love being able to move things freely around, but I also like to be able to go in here and just quickly type in coordinates. A couple of other tips. Down at the bottom left-hand side, you see this little widget down here. That's your camera widget. So just simply clicking down here and moving this around is going to move your scene. So if you're accidentally clicking on the object and moving that around and you wanted to edit the camera, you can either click on the ground plane if the object isn't selected, which it is, Or come down here, let me just undo that movement, come down in here and move it around. So the object selected, if we try to click on the ground plane, I'm moving the object because it's selected, so you can circumvent that just by grabbing down inside here. There's also another great floating window up inside here. You can see I'm moving around in this, and we can flip these two views. So this is an overhead view, and you can tell Photoshop what view you want that to be. And we can flip this view. Watch this, swap main and swap secondary view. I'm jumping back between these two views. So if you're working primarily on the left-hand side and then your final beauty shot, it's easy to jump around between those two. So you can easily get around there and find each one of those spots. So just be careful about what you're selecting over here in this 3D panel. I virtually am just not even looking at my layers panel over here, just strictly looking inside the 3D panels for any of these elements down in here. The current view, as I mentioned before, is showing my camera view, and you've got all the different views that you can save inside here. So we could save a specific view and call that view up later. We can work with each individual part of the model. So by default, I'm working at the full model here, but now if we want to work into the materials, now you're clicking on each one of those parts. And when I click and open this up, this is where I get to go through all of my materials. Of course, I can expand this window, and I saved a material down in here. This is my reflective material with an environment map on it. And with that selected, I could select each one of these other parts of the model and apply that same look. If you want to edit any of these things, that's what, again, the little flyout here is the ability to load a texture. So right now we just have a default color on here, and we don't have any texture. The texture that you're seeing is actually the reflection of the scene itself. And for that, we can go up to our environment, and we can see down here we've got a background setting in here where we could load that in. We can turn on and off the ground plane. We can say whether something is accepting or casting shadows. We can set whether something is image-based light, so you can see as I turn that on, the image-based light is taking effect inside there. So all of these different things are there. You just simply need to access them directly over here in the 3D panel, and then look at this new properties panel, which is kind of like your catch-all for all of the things that are going on inside here. So that gives you a great idea of where the new controls are in Photoshop CS6 versus CS5. They're still there. The coordinates and accuracy that we used to have are still there. They're just inside the properties panel. Make sure you break out that 3D panel, and let's get our 3D happening in Photoshop CS6.